To see examples of what we talked about on this episode, along with further information, go to bunchofdorks.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to
Two Dimension Podcast,
the comic book podcast
with no direction.
What's up, everybody? You know that song. You know this voice. That's right. It's the boy wonder Rook. And with me, as always, is the commissioner. He's already lit the bat signal. Everybody say hi to Don Moore.
A very excited Don.
A very excited Don, because if you haven't caught the clues yet, we are very excited to talk to the one and only, the heiress of Batman. Everyone, please welcome Athena Finger.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am so thrilled to get to talk to you. We spend an exorbitant amount of time on this show talking about creator rights and encouraging people to look into who really created things. So your story, everything about you is just, it sits at the heart of what we do. And I just, this is such an amazing opportunity to get to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me again. I mean, I'm always willing to come and talk to the fans and talk Batman or Bill or whatever else you want to talk about.
Just to lighten this, the first time I ever heard of Bill Finger was in 1974. They reprinted the first issue of Batman back then, which to me, I was 12 at the time. It was a thrill. But the inside cover, the publisher of DC Comics, Carmine Infantino, he wrote a whole piece, and he was saying Batman lost one of his fathers today. And then he told the whole story of Bill Finger, lovingly. And it was strange, because I had no idea. Anytime you saw Batman, it said Bob Kane. Even the TV show from 1966, it said Batman, Bob Kane. And I was telling friends of mine over the years that a guy died that did Batman. And said, Bob Kane's still alive. It wasn't Bob Kane. Well, Bob Kane did Batman. I mean, that's what everybody thought.
Well, unfortunately, that's what Bob Kane and National DC put out there. That was the story that they put out there. A lot of the Golden Age comics usually only had one name listed, which was an industry norm. It was usually the artist. So there were some norms there, but Bob Kane could have at any time acknowledged what Bill had done in the creation and his contributions, which he did later on in his book, but by that time it was too late. So it's a tricky situation because again, we're talking 1939. The industry is still a baby and trying to figure out the ways, and it was already pretty corrupt to start with. Yes. It was never an innocent industry. No. So, there were a lot of factors going on there, and so Bob Kane, recognized the talent that he had around him and took advantage of that and wanted to be famous, and so kind of secured his fame with whatever agreements that he had with DC at the time.
Yeah. Now, Athena, I understand you knew the story of your grandfather's connection early on in life, and you grew up with this, and people just kind of dismissed you or questioned you or aggressively just kind of were like, yeah, right, tell me the real story. that's got to be extremely difficult growing up that way. How much did you disconnect with comic books? Did you growing up? Did you actively try and ignore anything comic booky in your life?
I didn't actively try to not read comics. I just wasn't a comic book reader, but I was really into animation and art and, that visual side of it other than the printed page. Mm-hmm. A lot of live action. I was more into the movies. I grew up watching horror. My dad took me to the movies all the time. My mom took me to the movies all the time. I was a product of the 80s with some of the best films that were put out. So that was really what I gravitated towards more than the comics. I was doing a lot of my own art at a young age and trying to come up with my own cartoons and things like that. Knowing the connection that I had to comics, even though Bill wasn't the artist, he was the writer, and I don't like words so much, and I never really did. So I was more about, telling the story through the visual versus the read.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I stood with the whole comic thing. But as I got older, I did kind of shy away from talking about Bill or talking about Batman or just getting frustrated. I was one of those weird people that would go into the comic book store and be like, hey, do you know who Bill Finger is? And then they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, well, you shouldn't be working here then because that's the creator of Batman. And he's, no, Bob Kane. I'm like,
yeah.
Well,
okay, have a good day. It's you just kind of get frustrated after a while, and then you just kind of put it to the back, and you don't really think about it or talk about it unless you have select people, which I did in my life. I had select people that I would talk to about it.
Right. I never heard, again, we all grew up thinking it was all Bob Kane. It was John Byrne, the cartoonist, in 1981. He drew a issue of Batman, and at the convention I was at, somebody asked him if he was, how he's drawing Batman, something about the cape, if he was taking it from this. And John Byrne explained about Dick Spring, and Jerry Robinson, and he did talk about Bill Finger at one point. That's the first time, besides that piece I read when I was 12.
Right.
And but they were never credited. And he even made a joke when, there's a whole circle of people, they're like, what? And he made a joke about, what does your dad do for a living? Oh, he's Bob Kane. It was kind of a joke. I'd hear Bill Finger's name once in a while. But when I say this, the people at the comic shop, I was the same way. It was a vague recollection. His name wasn't out there. There's another podcast, Word Balloon, and 70s writer, Marty Pascal. He was talking, and he's saying, I guess DC in 74 did a big comic convention in New York, and it was a who's who of comic creators there, and basically he said Bob Kane got up and did a tribute to Bill Finger, because Bill Finger had passed away. And it was just nothing but glowing about how great he was. And then Marty Pascal said all the creators in the audience were all bitter, just saying, you never said any of that stuff when he was alive, you son of a bitch. That was the thinking. The way everybody on this show knows Bill Finger is because of this book, Bill the Boy Wonder, by Tyler Nobleman and Ty Templeton. And the funny thing about that was I lent this to everybody that did the show. As a matter of fact, I hadn't seen Rook until we were getting ready to record, so I made him read it before we recorded. And
it's a great book. I mean, he did a good job with the story and the the whole long right up at the end with the family and all the more of the background of the actual family part, like I said, and then of course Ty is an amazing illustrator. So.
Ty, the guy, yes. But that's I've heard Tyler get on other podcasts and talk and tell the story. And what they were really trying to do was get a Google Doodle of Bill Finger. They were working extremely hard to get that. Mm-hmm. And there was other people, I think because of these guys really fronting it, they were trying to get Bill Finger credit. And of course DC wouldn't, and I guess they say they couldn't, but they were talking about a living relative. And then it came out, you came up. And that's as far as I've ever heard. They say we found his granddaughter, and we heard that you spoke to him, was happy about it. What was that like when they approached you? I mean, what was that like the first time?
It was a mixed bag for sure. Because, he wasn't the first person to contact me through social media at the time about Bill. And so I wasn't sure if there was actually any substance behind what he was saying, but I was still willing to talk about it because there were so few people actually talking about it, and I wasn't part of the comic culture and going to conventions and reading comics and knowing all about the history of comics. It's not what I gravitated towards, so I didn't know that there were groups of people that actually knew my grandfather, one, that were still alive, and two, that there was actually a lot of people in and out of the industry who knew the truth of what Bill's contributions were. So I was very naive because, again, I was not part of the world and not paying attention. And but eager to tell the story and just see where it goes. Because there were a few people that would contact me, but like I said, he wasn't the first. Yeah. And then, so what comes with that is also the family side of it, of the not fully coming to terms with my father's passing away, and the horrible stuff that preceded his passing with, royalties being stolen and various fraudulent things going on with that, and just a constant, as I would say in the documentary, it was just basically a dark cloud that would follow me around. It wasn't positive. I was discouraged from pursuing anything. So it was all these things kind of put together, and then trying to see if there's any ray of light breaking through that could potentially make this a positive outcome one way or another. But it took a long time for him to even convince me to approach it. I didn't necessarily want to approach it because I had been discouraged for my whole life, basically. But I'm glad he did push me to pursue it and start talking to people. Obviously, we came to a wonderful resolution with the process that we went through. But it was, a mixed bag. I was excited, I was scared, I was upset, I was sad because I was starting to think about my father and the fight that he went through for his dad, and how it fell upon me, and how I never really truly resolved my own issues with his death, and having the responsibility of fighting for the rights for my grandfather placed on me at such a young age. I was barely 16. I hadn't even turned 16 yet when my father passed away. So it was a lot to come up, to deal with which I never really fully dealt with. I kind of just put it to the back and carried on with my life. But, life tends to smack you in the face sometimes.
Right.
And then here comes Mark, kind of opening all these old wounds, and just that had to be a lot. And I just I can't say enough great things about you for taking up the fight and seeing. Was it Mark's encouragement? Was it the overall comic book culture's encouragement? What was the moment that you feel was like, I'm going for it? I'm gonna try.
So I was finally brought into the DC family in 2008. I mean, a little before that, but that's when I actually got to go up and meet them, and have the tour of the office when it was still in New York, and Paul Levitz was still the president publisher at the time. And I got to meet everybody at the office, and, that's where Paul gave me a gift of the very last scripts that Bill ever submitted to DC before he passed away. I was kind of blown away by that. And so it was very welcoming when it was still Paul running things, and not that they're not now. I'm not saying that they're not. It was just different.
Yeah.
Because it was still considered. I mean, even though that Time Warner was still the umbrella company for DC, it still had its own kind of small company feel to it. It wasn't until 2012 when Warner Brothers had really taken more control over it, and it became DC Entertainment and the big shift, and then they left New York and all of that stuff. So in 2012, when The Dark Knight Rises came out, they wanted me to terminate my rights, and I refused, and that kind of forced me to start really actively pursuing getting Bill the credit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I have to commend you for that, because it would be so easy to sign that and move on and live a quote-unquote normal life, but Bill needed his credit. I mean, he was like a dirty little secret in the industry that, like, the fans knew, the creators knew, the execs all knew about it, but nobody had enough spine to do something about it,
Well,
so
it really only fell upon me. Nobody else could do it.
Yeah.
Because you're the only heir,
Right.
correct? Yeah.
Correct.
So that's a lot to deal with. That really is.
It's a lot of pressure. It is. And again, I think that's why I kind of avoided it. Now, I'm not saying that I completely just ignored the fact after my father passed away for 15 years, because after he passed away, and after I graduated from high school and started coming into my adulthood, I did reach out to DC and say, hey, what can I do to start unraveling this mess? What can I do to take care of the person that stole from my father and then stole from me after he passed away? How can I deal with this stuff with you? I want to get it resolved. And they wanted nothing to do with me at that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Mark actually started talking to the people at DC and then gave me someone to talk to in the legal department. But they were talking 2007. And my dad passed away in 92.
Yeah.
It's not like they didn't know who I was. They knew I existed.
Yeah.
So I think it's so funny in the documentary where like, oh, we discovered Athena, and it's like, I've always been here, and DC has always known about me. It's not that I've been, this long-lost child that had no idea who I was and what connection I had to the character. Quite the opposite. It's just that I was always discouraged, again, from pursuing any kind of anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's shameful on DC's part. It really is. I've watched multiple interviews with you, listened to you on several podcasts, and going through all of this, I feel like you could very easily just rag on them and talk bad about everything, and just I feel like you have the right to be able to attack, but yet you are so. Your overall demeanor, you're smiling, you're happy. I've noticed you laugh a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I don't think I could have dealt with things or show a public face as you have.
Listen, I wasn't always put together. Okay?
I don't think any of us are, but
no, seriously. During all of this, there were some dark years for me.
yeah.
They were not healthy. They were self-destructive behaviors. And some of it was dealing with wounds.
Yeah.
Some of it was dealing with a recent divorce, a bad breakup with another boyfriend. Like, there were just factors that really played into it. And fortunately, my job teaching at the college kept me, and my son, obviously. Children always keep you kind of, well, they're supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, between my job and my son, they kind of carried me through. And then once I came closer to seeing that there was resolution, there was actual light at the end of the tunnel with the Batman case, I cleaned myself up.
Yeah.
I said, if I'm going to be out there doing the PR side of this, because I'm not a lawyer, I know nothing about the legal side of it, because that's not me. I can't be a hot mess going in front of people.
Yeah.
So I pull myself up out of the hole and embraced my new role in the public eye, where I'm extremely thankful to the fans, because without the fans, we wouldn't be talking about Batman, almost 85 years later, and celebrating the stories and the characters and everything that comes with the Batman name. So it was just, for me in the beginning, it was learning more about the culture, about the fan base, the diversity of the fan base. Again, not reading comics, not being part of the culture, you kind of have to learn this. Luckily, I had some great people who brought me into the scene. My first convention was in St. Louis, Wizard World. Did my first panel. I called my friend. I'm like, do I need to do some studying, because do I need to prepare something? Being an educator, you think that way, right?
Right.
So, he's like, no, it's just a conversation. Even if you just sit there and don't say anything but your name, it's fine. I was like, okay, so that kind of took the pressure off. And, this was kind of a big year. It was the, 75th anniversary of Batman, and it was my grandfather's 100th birthday, and it was the 30th anniversary of the Batman movie. Like, all of this stuff, or the 25th anniversary of the Batman movie. So it was like all of this stuff all coming together that one particular year. So after that one was San Diego Comic-Con, which was a completely different animal.
Yes.
So, but again, really being able to see people who either knew the story or heard the name but didn't know the story, or had no idea and were eager to hear the story, which was great, because I had never had that experience before, except for with, my close friends. Of course, they're going to listen to their friends tell their story, you know what I mean? It's a little different. So this was a much needed eye-opener for myself. Again, not knowing that people actually did know the story, and were crusading for Bill in their own way and things like that. So I got to meet some amazingly talented, wonderful, supportive people along the way to help me kind of navigate through this whole new public persona that I need to embrace, because the fans want that connection. And I recognize that right away. They really do. and I embraced that. I again, being a college educator, dealing with that demographic, you know how to kind of navigate through large groups of people. I kind of pick up on what they're looking for, and so they're really looking for that connection. I was really the only one out of the team that was doing that, because the Bob Kane daughter wants nothing to do with the public eye, and Mrs. Kane doesn't go out in public, and she's older at the time, and so I kind of looked at it as I was the only one out there really telling the true history and trying to correct the history at that point, because it had not been corrected. Yeah. And I think that the fans deserve to hear the truth and not what they've been force-fed for 75 years at that point.
Yes.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the things when we talk about the golden age of comics, yes, it was the creation and the start point for so many things, but there's unfortunately so many stories like this where a writer or an artist was a ghostwriter, a ghost artist, and nobody knew who they were. So, those in the industry knew, but the people reading the kids reading the comics didn't know. And as we all started getting older, we started looking more at the writers, the artists, and things. And Don was actually the first person to say your grandfather's name to me, Bill Finger, and I was like, huh? Who is this? And I'm one of those weird guys that, I can tell you all about a character's history, but I can't tell you anybody who created them or worked on them or anything. Don has educated me over the years of doing this show, and when I learned about it, it was just like, this is something that we should all stand for. Yes. And I found that those who collect comics, those who read them, who are into this world, the fan base is very much like that. The fan base very much supports the idea that the creators get the credit they deserve. And, I can't see why anybody wouldn't embrace you and welcome you into this world. It's a world you belong in.
Like I said, I've embraced it. It's completely different. I'm actually pretty shy, so to be forced to be into the public figure, you would think I'd be totally fine being a professor and being in front of students, but it's a completely different.
Totally different dynamic.
Totally different. I could talk algebra all day long, but then, and a lot of that was because I wasn't educated. And I was still learning. And I was such a noob. And I knew I was such a noob. And I knew that people wanted to ask me questions about, this particular comic and this particular storyline or this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, I have no freaking idea. I'm so sorry.
Did you ever get anybody that got upset by that? Like, how do you not know? You're his granddaughter. You must know.
Not seriously. Not seriously. No, and I was relieved when people were like, "Oh, okay, well, this is what it's about," or "You should really check it out. It's a really great storyline," or "That's okay. Don't worry about it." What kind of stuff are you into? And it will lead into a different conversation. So, it just depends on the person, but I've found that the fans are more forgiving than I thought they would be because I'm not educated.
Well, that makes me feel fantastic because this world can have some very foul gatekeepers, and so for them to behave that way, it really that puts a huge smile on my face. So
I've only encountered a couple trolls over the years. I mean, unfortunately, Bob Kane made himself a villain in his own story, and so that's where most people are with the Bob Kane story.
Yeah.
But there are a few out there that are going to be holding on to that lie for whatever reason, even though it's been, proven that it's not accurate. And I say not accurate because Bob Kane did come up with the initial concept. If he didn't come up with that initial concept, then my grandfather would have had nothing to change and mold into what we have now. Right? So I'd never want to take away from Bob Kane's role in the whole creative process.
Yeah, that's great.
That's well said. One thing what she's talking about for people listening, when Bob Kane came, Superman was such a big thing, and a year later they were trying to get another character, and they were telling all the artists that worked for, at the time it's called National Comics, they needed another character. And so Bob Kane basically used Superman as a template, and he came up with a blonde-headed man in a red Union suit with bat wings that were from a Leonardo da Vinci drawing. And it just wasn't there. And he knew Bill Finger. Bill Finger was wanting to be a writer. I think they'd
actually already been working together at that point.
Oh, I never knew that. Could you tell us?
Yes, they actually met at a party. They had both graduated from the same high school. My grandfather was a couple years older than him.
Okay.
And they had a mutual friend, and they met at a party. My dad was selling, my grandfather, was selling shoes at the time, and Bob had already established a small studio out of his bedroom in his parents' apartment, and already had a couple of strips that he had been doing. Actually, already had a relationship with National because of the strips that he had. And asked Bill, what do you want to do? Two guys at a party just shooting the shit, basically. Yeah. And Bill says, I really want to be a writer. And so Bob hired him to be a writer for his early comic strips before he came up with the Batman concept.
I never heard that story before. Wow. But with the Batman, Bill Finger, he was the one that said if he's Batman, he should be a creature of the night.
Yes.
He should wear colors that or be hard to see at night, which again, the original Batman was black and gray, which he is now, again. He was the one that talked about he should have an emblem on his chest, he should have the hood with the bat ears, the scallop cape, everything that you know and love about Batman was because of Bill Finger.
Yes, and although he was a writer, he was extremely visual with his writing.
Yes.
He would leave source material for the artists, clip-its, notes on how the panel should look with the words with the scripts. So he saw the stories as he wrote them. He just didn't see the words. He saw the action happening. So he knew how he was going to flush it out from that point, getting the initial concept is going. And then, unfortunately, since he had such a short amount of time to write that first story, he actually stole the story from somebody else, just like they stole most of the artwork from another source. So, but they swiped art from each other all the time back in the day.
Still do.
So it wasn't uncommon. They didn't yell at each other for doing that. I mean, a lot of the time they were copying their own work just for time purposes because they had such a short amount of time to get drawings and stories out. So, and Bill took the story from, I think, a Shadow story, and so they kind of slapped it together and came up with the Batman first initial story with over a weekend.
Wow. They say that artists love getting scripts from Bill Finger. Bill Finger was always famous for giant props, giant typewriters, stuff like that they were jumping across. I do know what you just talked about. When he'd send in scripts, he would always add a scientific fact or some discovery. And he'd always send the newspaper article, clipped out with the illustration. He would send references to people, to the artists for that, but that to them was a treat to get his. They said the stories were fun, they were well thought out, easy to draw. And the story always had a twist at one point. This is why when I realized which stories he wrote, they were the ones I liked the most. But he always had it was a twist based off that scientific fact that nobody saw coming.
Well, he put a lot of research into his stories, or even just having his gimmick book with cool little facts or observations, or clippings like from the newspaper and things like that, that he would incorporate into stories. And even other writers knew that if they were having some writer's block, that Bill was the man to go to, because he had all these great little ideas in his little book. And he would share his book with his colleagues all the time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, to me that's a measure of a human being, because that's all I've ever heard about was he liked to help everybody out. It wasn't like what's in it for me, which I think maybe that was sometimes to his detriment, which I think that was a good thing he was doing, but I think he expected everybody to be that way. And
well, he was an artist. He was a true artist. He was a man of his craft. He was not about being rich and famous. Yes, money and wealth is always nice to have, but he wanted to tell stories. That was his passion. That's what drove him. So I think that he was humbled with the opportunity of being a Jewish man in the 40s to be able to write stories, even though they're for the funny pages for those kids. He still got to create this whole world and play with his toys, basically, in this world that he created for the most part. I mean, he wasn't the only one, but he was, he was the original writer. He came up with a lot of the stuff that we know today. He came up with most of the Rose Gallery that we love. He's the one that initiated the Sidekick to have Robin, because, back in the day, if you're talking to yourself, you're crazy and you're thrown into an institute. So he needed someone to talk to. So that's where Robin came into play. I mean, there was a lot of things that Bill did that was so forward-thinking for the time that we still appreciate now, and that no other characters have really been able to compete with.
Right.
It seems like he's at a level, and then everybody else is competing with each other at the bottom. I mean, not to put him up that high, because I know that there's other characters, but it just seems like he's set at a different level than a lot of these other characters that are beloved and known and very popular. I'm not saying that they're not. It's just it's different.
Batman stands heads over shoulders, and I'm going to apologize to people that have been listening to the show a long time. Since you're here, I'm going to tell this story again. I was 4 years old. This is in '66. And I walked into the living room. I was going outside. My parents are watching TV. And my dad said, "Don, Batman is coming on TV." And I looked at him and says, "What's Batman?" And he said, "It's a guy that dresses up like a bat." At that point in my life, the only bat I knew was a baseball bat. And it just sounded okay.
So little 4-year-old Don envisioned.
Well, at the time, my dad was changing careers, and my mom went and got a job again. So they were taking me to this daycare. And at one point in the day, we'd all just sit in this one room watching TV. And they had, they used to show these music shows on the beach, where a bunch of kids, or sometimes the artist, would come and sing a song on the beach. And they did the Batman theme song. And it was all these kids, I guess, dressed up like Robin. And they were singing that Batman. And we're all, it was, a whole thing. It was probably about 40 boys and girls. And I'm sitting there, and my mouth fell open. And at one point, there was a kid, I guess he was dressed up like Robin. We didn't have any context. But he's holding this kind of ray gun thing, looking at the camera over his shoulder, and smoke is coming out of the end of the gun. And he's really intense singing Batman. And I'm just like, oh my God. Well, when it finished, one of the teachers walked by the room, and one of the kids, and goes, "Mrs. Baker, did you see Batman?" And then another, "Mrs. Doty, did you see Batman?" We were all 40 of us were that way. When the show came on, we never missed it. And, I mean, it was the greatest thing in the world. Well, I was 4. When I turned 6, we moved to Oklahoma City. And it was Halloween, and this is the 60s. It was a different world. But there was a bunch of kids in the neighborhood. And, you know, there were some kids in our neighborhood and 2 blocks away. And they're all my age. And I said, "Can you go trick-or-treating with us?" And my father said, "Yeah, why not? I've been into town 3 weeks." Well, you got this gang of kids, and we're going door to door, and we get to this one apartment, and this guy comes out with a mechanic shirt. He wasn't aware it was Halloween. And he goes, "Boys, I don't have any..." Hold on just a minute. And he went and brought a big ashtray, and it was full of bat rings. At the time in the 60s, you got bat rings out of big bags of Fritos. And we're like, "Bat rings! Bat rings! Oh my God!" So he gave like just a group of 7 of us. Each one of us got a bat ring. And we're freaking out. And I remember we're going down the street. It's got bat. We couldn't even hardly talk. And, What is it? What is it? I know the guy ran out of bat rings. He must have ate a lot of Fritos. He was a bachelor. But that was my life growing up with Batman. You know, at the end of my working life, I got a job in a lumber yard. And I was loading trucks. And this is during COVID, you know, and a lot of contractors come in really foul moods. I don't think I've ever said this story on the show. I told Rook this. But the contractors come, they're irate. And as soon as I'd help them in, since I worked outside, I didn't have to wear the mask until I helped somebody. So I put the mask on. I was looking at what they needed so we could start loading it. And these 2 gentlemen were just irate. They were growling, they were mad, and they started putting the mask on, and all they were doing were getting the mask. "I hate those things. I know you hate them. What do you think about it?" And I just said, "Are you kidding? Batman wears a mask, and so do I." And these 2 gentlemen turn into little giddy girls. They're looking at me, and they're giggling. They're almost squealing. And they get the mask, and they put it on one ear, they put it on the other, and the whole time they're talking to her like that. And I was "Sir." And, you know, I looked at what they needed. I said, "Well, we could move the truck here and load this stuff. It's better if you put this stuff at the bottom." They bought a bunch of stuff. They were going to be busy for a long time. And giggling the whole time. We loaded everything up the way they wanted it. We, you know, strapped it down. They had a truck and a long bed trailer. And they got back in the truck, and they never took the mask off. They got in the truck, giggling, "Well, thank you, sir. Have a good day, sir." That was the power of what your dad created. I mean, I'm 60 years old. I was kind of joking, but it was true. You know, Batman is something that has never left people. He's my favorite character. He's a lot of people's favorite character, and not that he's the only one I like, but he stayed vibrant. And you know, when you're talking about your dad understood he was writing for kids and comic books, I was too young to read the stories when he was doing them. But my favorite thing was reading the reprint stories. You know, in the 70s, they'd have a Neil Adams Batman story in the front, but they would publish an old Batman story in the back. And those are the ones that thrilled me. So he wrote comics for kids. I was a kid. Thank you very much. They warmed and illuminated my childhood.
Yeah, Batman has such a power. And, you know, there's another character I want to talk about. It's Green Lantern. The original Green Lantern was also one of his creations.
Yes, he was.
I'm a huge Green Lantern fan.
Okay.
As you see, redhead. So it's very hard for me to find anything in comic books or anything in pop media that has a redhead other than, you know, the Andy Griffith Show. Yeah, you know, like, if I had one more person make that reference to me as a kid, I think I would have just like strangled them. So there would be no Guy Gardner without what your grandfather did, and that's a huge thing for me. I mean, you know, it's...
We wouldn't have the Justice League because he wrote for Justice Society.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have Wildcat because he also came up with Wildcat, which was also part of Justice Society. Some of the a lot of the world finest books Bill wrote. You know, a lot of those compilation things he had, you know, a good hand in. He had a finger in it. But you know, he was definitely, you know, I like to kind of call him one of the founding fathers of the industry because he kind of was.
Yes.
I mean,
he absolutely was.
He was part of that crew back in the day that was kind of building this whole universe that we have now with all the multi-universes and the Earth 1 and Earth 2 and this, that, and the ever, you know, I can't even keep it all straight.
Don't worry, none of us can.
Yeah.
Not even the publishers half the time.
Yeah. One thing though,
there's so many, and you know, he didn't just write for DC. I mean, he also wrote for Timely, which is now Marvel. He did a lot of the compilation, you know, pre-Avenger compilation books and stories. You know, so he really, you know, had a lot to say, apparently.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wrote movies. He wrote for the Army. You know, he did so much work. And
he also wrote movies. He wrote for the Batman series.
The TV show.
2-part Clock King episode. He wrote for Sunset Strip 66, and like he wrote for a lot. He wrote for radio, like you said. He wrote for the Army. I mean, again, he was a struggling artist, so he took the work where he could, and that's where a lot of that came from, because he didn't have the income that Bob Kane had from the Batman title.
Right.
So, you know, Batman was written by Bill for 25 years until he asked for health insurance, and then a lot of the old-timers that were still at DC at that time were phased out, and he was taken off the title because he needed health insurance. So they said, oh, no. So that's when he was taken off, and then that's when he kind of ventured out into doing more things with like TV and radio and the Army and writing with his friend Charles Sinclair and things like that. So, I mean, it's kind of a sad, tragic story for him because he never really did get the notoriety outside his colleagues that he should have.
That's a story.
Like you said, they loved him. They respected him.
Yeah.
But the person who should have respected him had no respect for anyone.
No.
Yeah.
Well, Bob Kane threw Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster under the bus when they had the lawsuit against Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We've talked about on the show.
Nice person. He just was not a nice person.
Yeah, no, he was. Anyway, you get those kind of people, but a lot of the stuff that Bill Finger had worked on are vibrant to this day. In some shape or form, and it's because of what he had done. I want to go back to, you're a college professor, and you mentioned algebra. You teach mathematics?
I do. I actually don't teach at the college anymore. I stopped teaching at the college back in 2018. I taught at a small college in South Florida for 8 years. I taught developmental algebra to adults. So it was people who didn't do well on the placement test, or they didn't do well in high school and they fell through the cracks, or they're coming from another country, or they haven't been in school for a very long time and they're adults coming back to school. So I had a full spectrum of students in my classroom. I missed that job a lot, but I relocated, so I had to let it go.
Right.
I've been a private instructor for almost 20 years, though, doing private tutoring.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this because we try to research as much as we can what we're going to talk to on the show, and I saw that you did artwork, and I mentioned it to Rook. He'd seen it, and I was reading about you're an artist, and mathematics was the furthest thing I was expecting. That's actually really amazing.
Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of words. Growing up, I had a slight hearing issue, and phonetically I had problems hearing things, so I was struggling a lot with the written language because I couldn't hear words properly, so writing was something I shied away from because my spelling, which is still really bad but better, was something that always hurt me in school because being in the early 80s, we didn't have all the technology with, predicting text and autocorrect and all this wonderful stuff that we have now that I wish we had when I was really young. So I gravitated towards the visual. I had always been drawing and doodling and stuff as a child, and like I said, I was not reading comics because I was creating artwork and coming up with my own little silly characters and things like that. So I just recently got back into doing artwork in the last 5-6 years. I've gotten back into doing some stuff. When I was a teenager, I went to art school for a little while. I always was doing some kind of photography or painting or drawing or something along those lines. So. But I've been doing a lot more painting, and I do commission work if people want it. I do a lot of the classic covers or some original pieces where they want Bill Finger worked into the image in some way and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. I love it.
Now, Rook and I were talking about your artwork, and I have a feeling he was more successful than I was. I've only seen 3 of your pieces, and it's on your blog. One's okay, so my Instagram unfortunately got hacked. Oh.
Oh no!
So a lot of my artwork you can see on my public page on Facebook. There's some on my private page too. Also, I have to get them up on my new Instagram page. I just haven't gone through it yet because I'm still trying to get over the fact that I lost my Instagram page because they won't give it back to me.
Could you give us the address of your new Instagram page? Do you know it?
Sure. It's just my name with real at the end.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. I noticed there were 2 of them, and I obviously followed the hacked one because I figured the other one was your private one.
No, unfortunately. I tried to recover it several times, and Instagram won't give it back to me. So. I do have a website. It's just athenafinger.com. If you want to, there's some older work up there. I haven't updated the website because nothing came of it. So bad. But some of my older stuff is there. And I do sell artwork at conventions. Like I have prints and postcards and things like that I do sell. Nice. And I've done some cover work for some people. I've done 2 variant covers for local artists here in Florida. I just got approached about doing another variant cover for another local artist. So, I try to do a little bit of everything wherever I can get the work, starving artist. But I've done some fun stuff for myself, too. I did a really fun Rocky and Bullwinkle piece, and I still need to finish my Adam West painting and, some other stuff. But, the fans like the old Batman artwork and stuff like that, so...
Yeah, I think it's because they feel like they can have that connection between you and your grandfather with that stuff. So that, and I was listening to a different show that you were on, and you were talking about the typewriter piece that you did. And as you were saying it, I had to pull it up and realize that you had hidden Bill Finger into the letters of the typewriter.
I did. And
I loved that.
I had no idea that I was going to do that, because typically you just do a traditional type, keyboard.
Yeah.
But I was like, no. I mean, they went out of their way. They wanted something specific, Bill Finger signature. So that's obviously why I went with the large typewriter. It's a fun image.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to give a little extra, you know. You have to do a little extra sometimes.
And that one is that was fun because I had seen it and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I hear you talking about it. I had to go back and look at it. I was like, I didn't even notice this. I love an artist that can hide things in their pieces. And somebody says something and you're like, wait, I have to go back and look at it now.
And that's actually the only piece that I've done that kind of hidden little thing in there.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that is fantastic. I love it.
But it just fit nicely because, I mean, it's a keyboard, so it was kind of easy to slip it in there.
Absolutely. So how much do you find yourself getting to be able to draw and paint and everything? That's a sigh of not as much as you want to.
No, well, I mean, I went back to school for a little while, and I took 2 very intense classes, so I wasn't able to get any artwork done during that time. I've actually recently been forcing myself to do some more sketching and drawing and trying to, get back into it. I have some commission pieces that I need to finish. Unfortunately, my office is set up for production right now, so I can't set up my painting space because my production space is set up. So I'm trying to get, some of my commission work done and get this production stuff done so I can get back to the commission stuff.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I'm currently sitting at my dining room table / workspace / painting space / drop everything on it because you just came home space.
Yeah, I've been there. It's just, it's convenient because all my stuff is set up in one area. I don't want to have to move it all. It's just, and with paint, it's messy. And it's so humid here in Florida that
oh yeah,
it messes with the paint, so I can't go outside and paint right now because we're like in the peak of, the summer getting into.
I'm just north of Tampa myself, and
Oh, okay.
It was I think it was feels like with the humidity of 109 today.
Yeah, it was disgusting outside.
Yeah.
I know I paint miniatures, and I have to put a base coat on them after I print them, and I had a commission that I'm sitting there going, okay, give me a good day. Let me be able to go out and paint and do the base coating. Come on. I eventually just had
down here because of the humidity.
Yeah, I had to eventually just turn on a dehumidifier in the garage and paint in there.
Yeah.
I can't use my garage; it's jam packed. I'm surprised you can fit the car in there.
Well, you can fit a car. You can fit a car in your garage. I can't do that.
I would have to, because one has to be in the driveway and one has to be in the garage.
Yeah. So you're out on the conventions. Going out. Are you back out on the conventions now? Going out meeting everybody.
I am. I just did 2 conventions the last 2 weekends, and next month we're driving out to San Diego Comic-Con, which I go out to present the Bill Finger Award at the Eisner Awards.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So I go out there for that. This time I'm actually doing a couple of panels with a couple of friends of mine, which is going to be a lot of fun. On anniversary years, they have me out there as a guest. So I've been out there quite a few times now, again, to help present the Bill Finger Award and, see my con family out there and enjoy San Diego and the craziness of the convention. I have another one that's definitely booked at the end of in the beginning of December. Krampus which is in Cocoa. I believe it's in Cocoa this year. So I've got some stuff. I probably have some more stuff come up in the meantime. I was just at MegaCon. It's getting back into it. I was at Grand Rapids not too long ago, so.
Yeah.
if you have a convention near you and you want me out there, start telling them.
There you go. You guys heard it.
When you say you present the Bill Finger Award, are you the one giving it to each recipient?
So the Bill Finger Award is given to 2 people.
Okay.
Given to one living and one deceased. These are people who worked in the industry who did not get their credit for their contributions to the industry. So typically we will present the award to the living if they're able to travel to the award ceremony, and we'll present them. And then a representative, family member, or however they want to handle giving the second one to the deceased member. And so, yeah, I get to do that with Mark Evanier. He's an awesome
I love him
for that, and he runs that right now. So he's been running that for a while, but Jerry Robinson is the one that started the whole Bill Finger Award back in the mid to late 90s, I believe. I think around 97.
Really?
And again, it's just, Jerry knew my grandfather, obviously, because he was Bob's ghost artist in the early years, and knew that Bill got screwed and wanted to do some part to have his name honored in the industry. So he figured that this would be a good way to do that, and use his name to honor others who didn't get the recognition.
I agree. This is the most awesome thing I ever heard, and I'll be honest with you, it seemed like it would mean a lot more that his granddaughter is the presenter. I'm kind of overwhelmed knowing that myself, That's something. I knew about the award, but I didn't know that you were involved in that capacity.
The first year I presented it was back in 2014 for the 75th anniversary, and that's when I first came into the actual convention scene and the comic world, and participating in these types of celebrations. Because that's really what it is. It's a celebration of people in the industry, living and deceased, and of course living for the Eisner Awards, because that's the Oscars for the comic industry. So I feel honored that I'm able to be there and play a role in recognizing these people that didn't get recognized.
That's a nice award. And I'm sorry that so many people that I grew up loving and not knowing who they were treated that way. Comic books have always been my favorite thing in the world. And when I see them, it's just a happy place for me. And I was surprised when you start lifting the rug and see what's underneath it. It's an ugly industry.
Yes.
Yeah, it's but not to me. I mean, from what I see, it's just happiness. But
because you don't see what's behind the curtain.
No, that's absolutely it. But as I said earlier,
you're not supposed to see what's behind the curtain. You're supposed to be enjoying the entertainment that's coming out from the curtain.
Right. Yeah. Well, like I said, a lot of these, a lot of the kids' comics, like Harvey comics and stuff, they never credited the creators. And the guy that basically made Donald Duck comics the greatest was Carl Barks. I started realizing his stories are different than the other ones when I was 9. A couple moved next door. The guy had just gotten out of the army, and I mowed his lawn for $1 a week. And he one time he asked me if I wanted some comic books. Yeah, he gave me a stack, and a lot of them were war comics, and there were Disney comics. And I was 9. I kind of thought those were for babies. But after I read the stack, I said, well, there's these Disney comics. So I started reading those. And some of the stories, I could just tell they were different. And what I referred to him as the guy that draws really good. And I think I was 16. I was 16 years old. I was in a comic store. And I was buying my books, and the owner said, "You didn't get the Karl Barks books?" So who's Karl Barks? And he said, he's the Disney artist that drew Donald Duck. He created Uncle Scrooge and the Beagle Boys. And as soon as he said, I knew who he was talking about. You mean the guy that draws really good? Yeah, that's him. Well, but that was code. It wasn't until I was in my much later in life, I started finding out and I'm still finding out certain people that I did not know anything about them. Now Archie artists, a bunch of these artists, and they've all been cheated. When I say cheated, though, I mean they earned a living. It probably could have been a lot better. I know they didn't get health insurance, which is a big part of anybody's jobs. But they still lived and did things they loved, but they touched a lot of lives. They absolutely touched mine. And it wasn't until this book came out that Bill Finger's name really stayed in my head. It was always on the cusp. I was sort of aware of him. So I'm glad that this is happening, and I'm certainly glad that you stepped up, even though that must have been overwhelming. But I'm glad
once again, I had some good people around me at the time to kind of show me that it's a positive and it doesn't have to be scary.
I'm glad for that.
That's great.
Something to shy away from. So, and again, the fans have been so awesome. I was a fairly private person. And I would always tell people, I have two separate worlds. I have my teaching world, not so much anymore, but when I was working at the college, I'm like, I have my teaching world, which is my real world. This is my reality. This is my stone. This is what keeps me grounded and humble, is that I get to work with all these people and teach math, something that I love doing, and I have a great time with my students. But then I have this very public world where I have to ensure that my grandfather's legacy doesn't get forgotten and that his story is still relevant.
Yeah.
It's something that unfortunately still happens today, not just necessarily in the comic industry, just in our society in general. Yes. People are always looking at an angle. How can I advance off of your idea? How can I steal what, this amazing thing that I know is going to make tons of money and make me famous? It's unfortunate that it still happens. So by telling stories like Bill's story and Jack Kirby's story and the many other people who fell into this role of being taken advantage of, it's kind of an important story. And especially being an artist myself too, you don't really think about protecting your creations.
No.
You're more about the creation itself and perfecting it to your likeness, which we will never like our own work. Yeah. The nature of being an artist, but that's really what artists get consumed with. They don't really think about the other side of what that could be and what it could represent, and the future of what it could represent for you and for your family and just history in general. I mean, it's such a sad thing that the fans were given the wrong history for 76 years. That's way too long for fans to not know the real history when they know about the Superman boys and they know about Ditko and Stan Lee and all these other important roles in the industry and have their truth be told. But when it came to Batman, it was nothing but a lie. I mean, that's just so backwards, considering he stands for justice and truth. And
well, and now with you, the world is knowing the truth, and it's I can't say it enough times. I just listening to you talk, watching the documentary, you've been through so much, and to stand there and be able to see and talk to people finally that recognize, and to get Bill Finger's name on the credit, where it belonged for years. Personally, I believe it belongs first, but that's my opinion.
His name's there. I was told my whole life that was never going to happen.
Well, you proved them all wrong, and congratulations.
Well, that seemed like that
you.
when they were pushing the Bill the Boy Wonder book, and they were trying to get the Google Doodle. Even then, it seemed like it was an uphill battle that wouldn't occur. And I'm happy. A lot of people know who Bill Finger is. His name is out there, and it seems like it's comfortable putting it out there all the time. So,
and we need more people to continue to tell the story, because there are still a lot of people that don't know the story, that don't watch Hulu documentaries, that don't go to conventions, don't listen to podcasts, don't watch YouTube videos. There's a lot of people that are not engaged in this side of culture whatsoever.
Right.
But, Bill's story is up there with, like, Tesla and so many others. That, their ideas were stolen and not credited properly and things like that. So, I've had people who are not comic fans who saw the documentary on Hulu, Batman and Bill, reach out to me on social media and say, hey, listen, I don't like superheroes. I don't watch superhero movies. I don't read comics. I'm not part of that world in any way. I just stumbled upon your documentary. Oh my God, what an amazing human story. Because it is. It's the story of Mark finding all this amazing research about this man that was pretty much a recluse, and there wasn't very much information out there, and his process of finding this information and then finding the family that was never known to the public, and then the process of bringing in the family and telling our story and telling, it's just, there's so much human element there, and overcoming the corporation, which is not often
that's not a story that happens very often.
Kept out on top, and in this case, we were able to get Bill's name in its proper place. And that was the goal.
Yeah, you've done it, and you're going to keep doing it. But I can't stress how excited we were when
I told my family about this, and like my father. Now, mind you, my dad. It took years for him to finally tell me this. He was looking through one of my books, I think it was a preview, and they had an article about the first appearance of Superman. And he stopped, and he's looking at it going, I had this when I was a kid. I was like, wait, what? You had what? And he goes, I had this comic when I was a kid. And he keeps reading, he's like, it's worth how much freaking money? Like, that was the first time I think my father looked at me and my collection of comic books and dorkiness as like, this could be something. Mm-hmm. And then I told him about getting to talk to you, and his eyes lit up. He's like, what, really? Oh my God, that's really cool. Oh, wow. It's amazing. And I got to sit and tell my dad your story, and he's sitting there like, well, that's ridiculous. Yeah, no, that's great that she did, So here's my father who just doesn't, he's just not into comics. He's not, I think he tolerated me for the most part with my weirdness growing up. But, here's a man that, will at some point end up telling one of his buddies this story as well, and it will spread that way too. And it's such an important story to tell. It really is.
It is. Again, it's the little man overcoming Goliath. It's the David and Goliath story, and everybody likes that story. It's a great story.
Yep.
Right? And everybody roots for the little guy, the underdog, and it just, we were fortunate enough that everybody was in agreement that Bill's name needed to be there. and it was just coming up with the right language so that everybody was happy and all of that stuff. So, I mean, again, timing plays a huge role into a lot of how this got resolved. So, you know, I think had it gone any other way other than it did, there would have been an uproar.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one thing comic book fans are really good about, is like causing a huge stir when they are dedicated to a concept, and you know, especially one of justice, where a creator needs to get their rights and their credit. You know, the comic book fans are really good at being super petty about things.
Well, vocal too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, vocal about it. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I mean, and I kind of needed to have the support of the fan base in that way, because, you know, without the fans, again, we wouldn't have been celebrating the 75th anniversary and the 80th anniversary and every other anniversary. You know, it's so. Having the support from the fans just made it that much more imperative to get it resolved one way or another. And seeing that, you know, the real fans did understand the complexity of the situation, but also the simplicity of the situation.
Yeah.
So I think they were sensitive to that, especially knowing that I was a noob coming into it. They didn't want to, like... put me in my cave. So I got two more questions for you. The first off, you have a son. How is he doing with all this? Is he into the comic books and Batman? Is he enjoying this limelight, or is he kind of hiding? When he was younger, I mean, my son's 20 now. He lives with his girlfriend. He's a musician. He's, you know, working at Chipotle. He's a 20-year-old.
Yep. Got one.
Back in 2014, though, you know, when we were going to conventions and stuff and starting to come into the scene, you know, he was 12. He was prime age for this. Prime. So when we started going to conventions and getting the royalty treatment, I mean, he was all about that. All about it. You know, and I get to tease him that he got to see the movies with, you know, a movie with Donald Trump and Daughtry and Ron Howard. And when we were in the movie theater, it's a funny story. This was at The Dark Knight Rises. Benjamin and I are sitting in the theater at our seats, just people watching, right? And 3 rows in front of us. I go, Benjamin, look, it's Donald Trump. He goes, Donald who? I laughed so hard. Because, I mean, he's so famous. Like, he's a famous person, and you've been doing The Apprentice, and, like, I'm like, remember the guy who says, you're fired? He's like, no, okay.
He's a kid. He wouldn't have any interest in that.
Oh, man.
Wait, who's Ron Howard again? I'm like, how do I put into this context for this 10-year-old that is, like, very limited? I'm like, okay, you know, The Grinch, right? The movie The Grinch?
Oh, a lot of movies.
Oh, man.
So, you know, it started with that, and then we started doing the documentary, and then the documentary came out, and he didn't really tell people about it. My son kind of had a similar experience to me, as far as people not really believing that his great-grandfather was the co-creator when he was in elementary school, but then the book came out, so he was able to show people, look, I'm not lying, this is true, this is what my great-grandfather did. And then when he got into middle school, he had a group of guys that he hung out with that he kind of mentioned it, but he was more about playing music and doing that part of his creative world, and I didn't force him to be comics or anything like that, and he kind of just, his dad's a professional musician, so that's where he gravitated towards with the music and things like that. So not so much, you know, when the documentary came out, he didn't really tell many people, and then he got his friends together and they watched it together, you know. But, I mean, he's not he's not like, yeah, let me tell the world.
Right,
He's
right.
like, let me go play my guitar and, go sing a song.
I've got this handled. She'll make sure everybody knows.
I mean, he's gotten to do some events with me, which has been really nice. Like I said, he went to the Dark Knight Rises premiere with me. When the Dawn of Justice came out, he got to do the movie and the after party with me for that one. He was a little older for that one. So, and he's done conventions with me and done some traveling. So he's gotten to see some of the positive side.
Good.
Of the whole thing. And then with the documentary, he got to, be a guest at New York Comic Con and things like that for it. And, totally adorable.
That's
but now he's 20 and he's all wrapped up in his young adult life.
Yep. We both know that feeling. My other question would be: now you're not a big comic book reader, but I understand you watch all the movies.
Yeah.
What do you think about the movies and the direction they're going these days with some of them?
That's such a loaded question because each rendition of the character with each different director and writer and vision for the character is so different.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people are very passionate about who their Batman is, who their live action Batman is, which director is their director, and which whatever. Okay.
Yep.
Each one brings something unique. Some movies obviously were way better than others. Some needed some reworking. As far as people who have put on the suit, Michael Keaton has always been my go-to, but, I think Ben Affleck and Val Kilmer don't get enough credit for their roles as playing Batman Bruce Wayne. I think they both did an amazing job, along with Michael Keaton. I think that Robert Pattinson has also done an amazing job. But a lot of that has to do with the story that's attached to the character, too, and the vision that's being portrayed with the storyline or the smash-up of storylines or whatever is going on. Even though, the George Clooney movie is super silly, but again, they were going back to the Adam West roots.
Yeah.
And the Christopher Nolan was bringing it back to the dark and, dreary look, very gloomy.
Yeah.
I wasn't a huge fan of Christian Bale as Batman Bruce Wayne. The movies were good. The first one I can't get through for whatever reason. Batman Beginnings, I fall asleep every time I put it on. I know that's bad to say, but it's the truth. It just doesn't keep me interested, even though the cast is amazing. Again, each one brings something different. Dawn of Justice, I really did like Ben Affleck as the character. I think he did a phenomenal job. Unfortunately, the stories attached to the two movies he was in were a hot mess.
Yeah.
I think had he had the right storyline with the right direction, we would be putting him right up there with Michael Keaton. And, so it's a loaded question, like I said, because each one is so different. And
I didn't mean it to be.
I'm a big, huge Tim Burton fan, so having the first two movies with Tim Burton, and Catwoman is so freaking hot, and it's such a fun movie too. Each one is just so different.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the fun things about it in many ways is that they are so different, and as you mentioned, certain movies brought in that Adam West nostalgic, over-the-top goofiness to the character. Others brought a very dark, or attempted a dark foreboding. It's just Batman is just fun in movies, I think. He's a great character to make movies with. And while I enjoyed Patterson's, I'm curious to see how long they can run that. Affleck's Batman, personally for me, was the quintessential capture of Frank Miller's Batman run. I mean, the suit, the attitude that he projected, I think he did the perfect Frank Miller Batman, and I would love to see more of it.
With the right director and the right storyline.
Yes. I mean, that's.
And again, that's the problem. A lot of people like to give him a lot of crap for those movies, and he was the worst Batman ever. No. Far from it. The stories were bad.
Yeah.
The stories were bad. That has nothing to do with him putting on the suit. He has no control over that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are good answers, by the way.
I put a lot of thought into them. I've had to answer them quite a bit.
Well, just to tell you, when we found out you were interested in coming to the show, I sent Rook a note. I was kind of overwhelmed with it. And when I told Rook, it was like the two of us just won Miss America, and they were giving us flowers and putting the crown on. We're, so you didn't let us down.
Yeah. When Jamie mentioned it, we were just like, we would love to talk to her. So I can't tell you enough how exciting this has been for us. It's just been an absolute thrill to have you on.
Yes.
Anytime that you want to come and anything you're doing, anything you want to talk about, anytime, you are welcome here.
Well, anytime you would like me back just to chit-chat, please. This has been a lot of fun. You guys are great to chit-chat with.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody listening, we use fake comic book covers for the Facebook page and the Facebook group to announce a new episode. Just like Athena mentioned before, nobody thinks the artwork is good, but we'll think it's good. People enjoy seeing these. I'm always on the verge of running out of them, so feel free to send one. If you're any kind of recording artist, singer, musician, I've said in the past, a mime, if you can figure out how to make an MP3 for it, we usually have a music break when we don't have a guest. And it's kind of dire. We're always running out of stuff, and Rook complains when I have to keep playing the same artist over and over again.
I do.
So, okay, Rook, anything else?
Everybody, remember, check out all of our fun things online at bunchofdorks.com. Click on that Cyclops. We've got fun t-shirts and things. Lots of cool things for you out there on the blog as well. Until next time, read more comics.
You can hear our most recent 20 episodes on iTunes. If you would like to hear our older episodes, you can find them on our blog. Just go to bunchofdorks.com and click on the Cyclops.
Third Dimension can be found on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, rate, leave a review, tell a friend, or like us on Facebook. Thanks for listening.